Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, CNBC senior analyst and commentator Ron Insana, national affairs correspondent at The Nation John Nichols, and Teddy Schleifer, who covers Elon Musk for the New York Times. Teddy, let's just stick on Elon for a second. This is supposed to be his big goodbye in the Oval Office, but both men are adamant that he's going to be sticking around.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk has a tricky dance to do right here. He needs to indicate to Trump that he's going to be sticking around enough and be at his service. But he also needs to indicate to Tesla shareholders and SpaceX shareholders that he's not going to be around too much because, after all, he runs those companies. So right now, the reason why the messaging is kind of garbled, Katie, is because he is trying to indicate to everybody that he's going to be there for everyone. And that's just hard to do.
Let's talk a little bit about Doge for a second and what Doge was able to do. 58,000 jobs were cut by Doge. 76,000 government employees took buyouts. Apparently, there are 150,000 more planned reduction. Doge estimates it saved $175 billion. It's hard to get some hard numbers on that, though, because the accounting that Doge has offered is sometimes filled with factual errors. Elon Musk had said very early on that he wanted $1 trillion worth of savings. There's one former Doge employee who came out and gave an interview, was fired after this interview, where he said that what he experienced, Teddy, while he was working with Doge, was that the government was pretty efficient. And there wasn't a lot that was easy to cut because it actually worked.
Sure. I mean, that interview you're referencing is kind of funny in its own way. Just this is sort of you realize the naivete in print on the record. Look, I mean, obviously, I think there are a lot of Republicans, frankly, who were excited about some cuts. I do think that Musk was a victim here of the high expectations he set. I mean, I think if he had gone in at the beginning of the administration and said, we're just trying to cut $100 billion, some people might have thought it was ridiculous. And some people might have thought that even they haven't cut $100 billion. And then you end up in a debate over the numbers. But if he had set the bar at that level, this would be a different legacy, or at least be a more debatable legacy. But, Musk and his team, came in with such bravado, throwing out these preposterous numbers that when you only cut $150 billion, even with an asterisk, it smells a bit different.
Vaughn, is Elon Musk right now for the White House an asset or a liability?
I would say probably.
I'm going to give that to Vaughn.
I'm sorry, Vaughn or Ron?
Vaughn.
I think it's a good question. I think it's in terms of what they wanted to ultimately prove to the American public as a success story of the idea of deconstructing the so-called administrative state. He was an asset, but far from a success. And I say that because when he set out on this Doge mission during the transition with, you'll recall, Vivek Ramaswamy, the two men said that this was going to be it. The conservatives for a long time had talked about downsizing the federal government and ensuring that the workforce was going to be not full of 90% the liberal workforce. And this was going to be the moment where they were going to come in and successively change the makeup of these executive federal agencies. And what happened, Vivek Ramaswamy left before even Inauguration Day, and Elon Musk is leaving after just 130 days, based off of the numbers that we have, and depending where some of this litigation goes, only downsizing the federal government workforce from 5 to 10%. And you noted, far from that trillion or even $2 trillion cut that he had announced at that Madison Square Garden rally before the 2024 election, what amounted to a promise. And yes, he ultimately dismantled Voice of America, crippled USAID, which is the main agency responsible for humanitarian aid and foreign aid. He cut the Department of Education, effectively their workforce, in half. He effectively got rid of the Consumer Protection Bureau. These are sizable impacts that Elon Musk and his Doge staff had. At the same time, you heard him and the president suggest that those individuals that he brought in administration side of these various agencies are going to continue their work. That over at the Treasury Department, they actively, DOJ employees have access to the Treasury payment systems. They are still in court trying to gain access to Social Security information. The IRS, effectively, they downsized their IT team, their tech team, from 100 workers down to just 3 workers, adding these DOJ employees to the mix here. So there are lasting impacts, and they are indicating that they are going to continue to work. At the same time, losing Elon Musk, losing Steve Davis, who is really his DOJ right hand, losing Katie Miller, who is an advocate internally for DOJ. Those are big losses here to the mission, and I think it's a question of just how much focus is this administration going to put towards this idea of deconstructing the administrative state, because you could argue that they lost their 2 champions in Vivek and Elon Musk in rather quick terms when they had set out to make this a 2-year mission, and both of them are now already gone.
In focusing on the foreign cuts, and you heard Donald Trump at the top of this talk about how they were able to cut these programs that nobody thought were a good idea, nobody could make sense of. Why do we have Sesame Street in Arabic? What's going on with that? Why is Burma getting cash? ProPublica did a big, long investigation about what the cuts to foreign aid have done overseas, especially in some unstable hotspots, created more instability, more chaos, and is making it easier for terrorism to increase, disease to spread, making us less safe here at home, because what happens overseas often doesn't just stay overseas, especially in the case with diseases. I mean, they can travel very easily, as we all experienced during COVID. Ron, Vaughn touched on so much of that. I'm sorry, I've got Ron, John, and Vaughn, so I'm gonna have to try to enunciate. Ron, Vaughn touched on so much of so many of the cuts. A lot of the cuts were done so haphazardly that many had to be walked back. They were cuts that were made to crucial government services that needed to be walked back really quickly. They, in some cases, had to rush to find the people that they fired to convince them to come back. I mean, it has been a legacy of chaos so far, and one that we could very much still feel the effects of going forward, even if they're trying to stabilize things.
Well, I think chaotic is the adjective that thus far describes almost every effort undertaken by this administration, Katie, insofar as when you're talking about tariffs, when you're talking about budget cuts, when you're talking about firings and rehirings, this has been such a haphazard process that CEO confidence, by the way, plunged by the largest amount in its most recent estimate in 50 years. You have so many people who are confused by what's being done or not done in Washington right now, what's being enacted, overturned by the courts, and then restored by the courts until it gets to the Supreme Court, that this is a wildly confusing period. And again, also calls into question whether or not DOJ has cut $175 billion at all. Now, we've also seen some additional unintended consequences, like food shipments that were supposed to go overseas to starving people in other countries sitting at port rotting. You know, things that were really not supposed to happen as part and parcel of these processes. And what really struck me in this conversation that took place in the Oval was that so many things that were said were just so incredibly inaccurate. The president talked about transgender mice. The $8 million he talked about had to do with what are called transgenic mice, mice that are used in scientific experiments where they alter their genetic structure so that they can see how certain drugs will affect humans, as mice have very similar DNA structures to human beings, and that's why they're used in medical experiments. All of these comments that came out, the greatest economy that we've ever seen in the first Trump administration, was roughly the same as the last 3 years of President Obama's administration. Very, very little measurable difference between the two. And so it's hard when you sit back and listen to that entire conversation to really put any of this into perspective that would make sense to a rational human.